Okay, so last time we were talking about Darwin and Wallace, the ideas of natural selection being one of the factors that leads to evolution, presenting that information in 1858, and then the critics saying, where's the evidence? Prove it. And that's what should be done. Anytime somebody presents information, you say, okay, I want to see proof. Do I believe it? No, I want to see it. I want you to prove it to me, especially big concepts, big ideas, theories, etc. What is the scientific evidence behind it? So Darwin started laying it out, saying, okay, let's look at the fossil record. And we talked about the horse and the evolutionary path that the horse has gone through over the course of about 60 million years. And the environment changing is what leads to changes in species, because you have to keep adapting. Your population has to keep adapting generation after generation, or you go extinct. Another piece are these things we call missing links. Now there's lots and lots of these in the fossil record. So missing links. Missing links are going to be intermediate forms that show features present in several different species. Okay, so the example here is this creature called Archaeopteryx. Where did birds come from? Cuvier would argue birds have always been birds and they're never going to change. They never were anything different. Scientific evidence says birds, no, they are basically reptiles. They've evolved certain adaptations and features, but birds came from reptile ancestors. They're related to reptiles. And Archaeopteryx shows us that kind of the fork in the road, so to speak, when we're talking about the evolutionary process. So imagine, let me get this here. Imagine here's your ancestral reptile population, and they're going through time, and some of them start to use or evolve different physical adaptations. Some of the other reptiles don't get those adaptations, and they keep going down the normal reptile path. Now, some branches will shoot off, they go extinct, things like that. Some of these branches go extinct. But what we're looking at is now we have, I'll just use the B for birds, and the R for the reptiles that are still around. So the missing link idea is, what do we have right here? Kind of this fork. Is there something that shows part bird, part reptile features that could be the ancestral or one of the ancestral populations? So here's the artistic reconstruction of Archaeopteryx. We can reconstruct fossils into these things the same way we can do it with, you find somebody, a body today, and you find a set of bones, and you can reconstruct what that individual looked like. What cannot be reconstructed is color of the feathers, color of the skin. That is somewhat of a guess, but it's a guess based upon what do we see present in living species today. All right, so this is our Archaeopteryx recreation from the fossil evidence. Okay, so look at the features. Feathers, those are unique to birds. Reptiles don't have feathers, birds do. Teeth, those are reptile features. Look at birds. They have a beak. They don't have pointy little teeth sticking out of their beak. You look at the tail with the vertebrae. There's a reptile feature. Birds have tail feathers, but they don't have an elongated tail sticking out of their backside. And then claws. Claws are found in reptiles and birds. You guys ever seen an eagle? Big claws. So here's a species that has this mixture. And as that population evolves and some of them adapt to certain lifestyles or what we call ecological niches, certain features are more beneficial for that ecological role or lifestyle. Other features are better going in another direction when you're looking at what is your lifestyle. And this is where the branch, the fork in the road occurred giving us rise to birds and reptiles. It's all in the fossil record. Okay? Continental drift, different line of evidence. When we look at continental drift, okay, so the continental drift we're looking at here shows the movement of the continents over the past roughly 225 million years ago. And this helps explain the geographical distribution of organisms on Earth today. So when we see fossils, and we say, okay, we got a fossil located here in Africa and the same fossils here in South America. Oh, let me move up to modern day. So here in Africa, here in South America. How did they get there? Well, rewind the evolutionary clock all the way back to Pangea. Here's Africa. Here's South America. So that species existed at least 225 million years ago in that part of the world. They died, they became fossilized, and then as the continents drifted apart, they're now in their current positions. So that drifting helps us say, okay, A, the Earth is much older than the 6,000 years Cuvier thought it was, and B, life existed in those different parts of the world, and that's why we have this diversity we have today. Okay, so continental drift, this is a geological line of evidence, by the way. It's not biological. This is geology supporting evolution with that piece of information. Now, biogeography is another line of support. Darwin actually came up with this. Biogeography is the distribution of life across the planet. Why we see these things on Earth where we see them. And this goes back to continental drift. So, anteaters, the spiny anteater, the giant armadillo, the pangolin, all these different animals. We see relatedness, commonality. Why? Because at one point they had a common ancestor that was on the continent when the continents were smashed together as Pangea 225 million years ago. So can we use that to help support the lines, or help support the idea of evolution? Anatomy. Straight up physical features. Okay, so anatomy supports the relatedness of species. Why do all what we call tetrapods, animals with 4 limbs, why do all these animals have the same bone plan in their arm? It's what we call homologous structure. It's the same basic feature or features due to common ancestry. All right, so take a look at the bird. The bird, the bat, the whale, cat, horses, humans. All of us have this bone called the humerus. We all have an ulna, we all have a radius, we have metacarpals and phalanges. Same order when we start from the shoulder moving towards the fingertips. The only difference is size, proportion, ratio. That difference is what enabled each of these groups to adapt to their specific ecological role or lifestyle. So you look at horses, big, strong humerus. We get the radius, the ulna, metacarpals, all the phalanges, the fingers in the horse. Well, they fuse together into one solid bone. So horses can run across open grassland. You can't do that with our hand. Our fingers don't allow us to run, but they allow us to grab things. Primates all have this hand. That enables us to hold onto branches and pick things up and move from tree to tree. That opposable thumb, big feature, that's really important for us. So homologous structures give us a line of anatomy that helps support the relatedness of species. we will also see things called analogous structures. Okay, so, let me get rid of that. All right, so analogous structures are going to be structures that are similar in function but come from different ancestral origins. So wings. Wings help things fly, whether it's a butterfly, a bat, a bird, etc., but they have different ancestral origins. What this is showing us is that the environment and the lifestyle helps, or the environment helps influence the lifestyle, which helps features evolve. So we'll get analogous structures in organisms that enable them to perform a similar function, even though they don't have the same evolutionary ancestor, or a very close evolutionary ancestor. And then the third type of anatomical feature is what we call vestigial structures. Okay, so these are structures that have no apparent function in modern organisms. We don't need it. But they were used in our ancestral populations that were different than us, but ones we evolved from. All right, so Cuvier said, whales have always been whales. They've never been anything other than whales. They were created, boom, here's your whale. All right, so Cuvier, why do whales have hip bones? Why do we see whales born with hips? Hip bones are only used in animals that walk on 4 legs. So if whales were always whales and they have the DNA for hips and occasionally they are born with hips, that was a pretty poor design to create a whale and waste the genetics and the anatomy on producing hips. We see a similar thing in different snakes. Pythons sometimes are born with tiny little legs. They don't need them, but their reptile ancestors had legs. Right? So in 2010, this dolphin was caught off the coast of Japan, and the dolphin has vestigial legs, these little limb buds here. That's what this thing is. This is a limb bud. It's not a fin, it's a leg structure. It has a humerus in it, it has a femur in it, the tibia, fibula. It has the basic leg bones. Why would that show up in a dolphin? Unless that DNA was there from a previous ancestor. So marine mammals, whales, dolphins, think about seals, sea lions, walruses, etc. Think about their anatomy. About 60 million years ago, mammals were running around on land with 4 legs. Over time, some of them evolved into a more aquatic existence. So you look at these guys, Pakicetus. Pakicetus is pretty similar to something like an otter. In the water, out of the water. In the water, out of the water. 4 legs, the hips go backwards when they're in the water to make them streamlined. They're really efficient in the water, but they still can come on land. As Pakicetus evolves into Rhodocetus, the back legs become less useful. So now think about a seal. Rhodocetus is more similar to a seal. You go, okay, back legs, not really usable that much. There's those back legs, not that useful. But you're really good in the water, but you're a mammal still. And then doldrum. Doldrum, you're almost at the whale point or the dolphin point. Your back legs are really not there at all, not being used at all, but you still have the genetics for them. Okay? And so doldrum, think about a walrus today. Walruses on land, not good animals at all. But you put those guys in the water, now we're talking. Something that's got a lot of functionality in the water. So we've seen this over the course of 60 million years in the evolution of marine mammals. It's another line of evidence to support evolution. The last lecture is a short one. We're only going to touch on the last couple pieces of evidence that support evolution.